Hello students, I'm sad to not be with you today, but I did not want you to lose any practice or time with your math, so we're moving right ahead and even learning a new topic here today. For many of you it will be review because we are talking about finding the area for parallelograms and triangles. So a little bit of background. Our parallelograms are our four-sided shapes, like our rectangles, our squares, our rhombuses, and any shape where opposite sides are parallel and congruent to each other. So here we have our parallelogram, and you have this right on your notes template. Let's see if this will let me grab a color. So this side will run parallel to this side. This side runs parallel to the side opposite it. That makes this shape a parallelogram. And then of course we have our triangle, our three-sided shape. So this whole unit, this geometry unit, I love it because they give you the formula, and it's really a matter of dropping these measures into their appropriate place in their formula. So if you refer to your formula sheet and find the picture that looks pretty close to the picture you have before you, it gives you the formula for area of a parallelogram. Now our formula for area of a parallelogram is area is equal to the measure of the base, which they will oftentimes give you, times the height. Now on that formula sheet you really can't go wrong because they even tell you where to find the base. If you find the picture that looks like this, you'll see that this side is labeled B for your base, and a parallelogram is made up of two bases that run parallel to each other. And they even tell you where to find your height. Your height and your base will always form a perpendicular relationship to each other. So look for that right angle, because that right angle shows you that we have two perpendicular or perpendicular relationship happening. Also, when I think height, I think how tall you are when you're standing straight up, and if obviously you're standing on the ground straight up. So that just another reminder that the base and the height are perpendicular to each other. So this 41, you don't need that. If you were to find perimeter, you could get some use out of that, but for area today, we just want those two measures. So our formula is area is equal to the base times the height. So we're going to plug in our measure for our base, which in this parallelogram is 45 centimeters. We're going to plug in our measure for our height, which in this parallelogram is 33 centimeters, and our formula tells us to multiply the two. You may do so with a calculator, I don't mind that. And our area for this parallelogram is going to be, let me pull this box out so you can see, 1,485 centimeters squared. There we go, that's a little better. All right, let's look at some more examples. Here we have another parallelogram. We need to find our base, find our height. This measure over here is extra for area. We don't need it. Perimeter, which would be the measure of the distance around, would require the use of that, but not for area. So I'm going to have you hit pause at this point to plug that into your formula so you can solve for area of this parallelogram. Okay, so our formula is area is equal to the measure of the base times the height, or in this case 6.1 meters times 12 meters, and we get a total area of 73.2 meters squared. Area is given in units squared because we're taking the space inside of a two-dimensional figure or polygon. Oh, this is different. Now we're switching gears a little bit. We're looking at triangles. Now we can't use the same formula. Our quadrilaterals have 4 sides. Our triangles have 3 sides. In order to use the same formula for this shape, I'd have to give it another or add to it rather. I'd have to make it a square in this case in order to use that base times height thing. But it's not a square. Does anyone pick up on the relationship between this shape, which is a triangle, and our four-sided shape that we looked at before? I don't know if you've recognized it, but a triangle is half the size. Here's one half. Here's another half. It's half the size of a rectangle. So our formula is what we were looking at before, base times height. But since a triangle is half of that, we're going to need to take that and cut it in half. And on your formula sheet, it looks like this: 1/2 times the base times the height. But really what's going on is they're taking the base times the height and they're dividing it by 2, or cutting it in half. So whichever you prefer, whichever method you prefer in your calculator, it's really up to you. So our formula, based on your formula sheet, again, find the picture of the triangle. You are still looking for that perpendicular relationship between the base and the height. You got to find that right angle. If it doesn't form a right angle, they're not perpendicular, and it's not the base and the height. It's another measure. So they've given us one side too many. We don't need 9 feet. We need our base and our height. We'll plug that into our handy-dandy formula. Area is equal to 1/2 because it's half the size of our rectangle or our quadrilateral. And our base is 3.4. I'm going to go ahead and use parentheses, times our height, which is 7. You'll plug that in your formula in your calculator. You can do this one of two ways. You can turn this into a decimal so that it makes it's a little more calculator friendly. Or you can multiply these, 3.4 times 7, and then divide by 2. If you don't believe me, do it both ways, and you'll see that you get the same answer. I'm going to go ahead and turn 1/2 into its decimal form, and do it in one swoop. Go ahead and hit pause so you can beat me to the answer. And the answer you should have gotten is an area that is equal to 11.9 feet squared. Here we have another triangle. Let's find that right angle. Here it is. That lets me know that I'm interested in this side and this side because they're going to give me that perpendicular relationship to form that right angle. And here is our height, how tall this triangle is. Here's our base, the distance that's perpendicular to the height. If it was a four-sided shape, I could use that base times height, but it's not. It's half the size of a four-sided shape. So I'm going to have to take the base times the height and cut that answer or that measure in half. So your formula sheet says this. Here's our formula: 1/2 times the base times the height. And just like with last time, to make it calculator friendly, if you want to turn this into a decimal, you can. You can also multiply 10.5 times 7 and then just cut it in half by dividing it by 2, whichever you prefer. Go ahead and hit pause to find the area. And the area for this triangle is 28 meters squared. 7 times 8, which is the base times the height, is 56. That would give us the whole rectangle, but it's not a rectangle. It's half the size of a rectangle or a triangle, so that would be 56 divided by 2, or 28. Okay, what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and complete the remaining practice questions in your notes template. Go ahead and hit pause, and we're going to look at the rest of those answers together. right, welcome back. So here's our parallelogram, here's our base, 5 centimeters is our height. Plug those values into our formula. We get an area 5 times 6, or 30 centimeters squared. Your next example was a triangle. You've got more measures than you need. Find the right angle first. Here it is. So we need 8. We need 10. Remember, we're going to take that base and that height and divide it by 2, because 80 times 10 would give you this, a parallelogram. It's not a parallelogram, it's half the size of a parallelogram, so you have to take 8 times 10, which is 80, and divide it by 2. Here's another triangle. You got way more values than you need. Here's that right angle. You'd have to draw it in. Again, the dotted line, that's a good giveaway that it's the height. So we're going to use 4 feet, and we're going to use 5.5 or 5 5/10 feet. We're going to multiply the two together, but that gives us the, where's my pointer? That gives us what it would be if it was a parallelogram, which it is not. It is half the size. So we're going to take the base and the height, or 4 times 5.5, take that number and divide it by 2. We get an area of 11 feet squared. And here we're back to our quadrilaterals. I wanted to throw that back in there because I didn't want you to forget that if it is a quadrilateral and it does have 4 sides, then you are going to take the height and the base. You don't have to worry about cutting it in half. That was just with your triangles. That was with this guy, if I was to cut it in half, but that's not what we have. We have a parallelogram. So it's just 3 3/10 times 10 4/10, and that gives us 34 32/100 meters squared. Thank you for tuning into your class's notes on triangles and quadrilaterals. I'd like you to do your best and practice the work that the wonderful substitute is going to give you today. I will see you all shortly. Take care now.